Hello, I'm Leslie, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make your very own Chablis Scrappy Cat. In the video I actually make this one, which I'm calling Monet because of the colouring reminds me of Monet's garden in Giverny. So I take you through creating the shell and all the components of it to your completed Chablis Scrappy Cat. So I've got the pattern pieces cut out here. Oh, there's one hiding. Body side, chest panel, inner outer thigh, leg components, head and the chin. And then you need to transfer the markings, so you've got a little dot which is just underneath the neck, the chest panel double dot, the head has got 3 dots so you remember which is the top, that's just denoted it's the top of the head. So transfer all your markings for the darts and the centre points, etc. And then we start with the body side, which is this piece. And you have a dart to do there, and the outer thigh, which is the one that's got the 2 darts. So we're going to do the 2 darts on that, and then we're going to join that together. Okay, so following on from the darts, we then have to join the outer thigh to the side. And if you join up the 2 darts, and I do it in 2 stages actually. I join this dart together and go to the back, and then I start again there and work my way down this way to the base, because you're doing like opposing curves, so that's an easier way to do it. So then you end up with this is the other side, and we then have to put the inner panel, the inner thigh in. So it's a similar process really, but what you want to do with this one is again start from the dart if it's easier for you and work along that top section, but only sew or stitch within this seam allowance, because otherwise it will show on the outside. So line it up and sew all the way along on the inside on the seam allowance of the thigh to join the outer thigh, inner thigh, so that way it'll end up like that, sewn on the inside. So you should end up like this, where you've got an inner space there, which is the inner thigh that you can stuff to give him a little bit more character, and on the inside it looks like that. So you've gone on the inside of that seam allowance so it doesn't show on the outside, and I've done the same. I've actually started at the dart and gone along the top, and then started again at the dart and gone down the side, just because it's a bit easier to measure it off that way, or you could just pin it and do it. So now we have to stitch the 2 sides together. That's the right side and the right side, and so this is the top of the head here, so just pin and stitch all the way down the side, going through all 4 layers, just line them up, go all through 4 layers all the way down to the base. So that's the 2 back panel or side panels joined together now. Again, it's a 10mm, 10mm seam allowance. So that's what you end up with. Turn it through to the right sides, and you've got these 2 thighs that are exposed like that. So we can move on to the head now, and it's a bit of a dart fest here because you've got 4 on each side, so I've already done those for you, quite straightforward. And then you join the 2 together, and those 3 dots there that's to remind you that that's where you join it, because I have done it around the back wrongly before, but the 3 dots are there to join the heads together and come down to this dot at the base. So that's along his front forehead and nose. Can also then join the 2 chest panels together. That's the 2 dots there, that's the curvature of his chest, so come down here. We joined the head together from the 3 dots at the top down to the single dot at the bottom, so that's the head joined. So this is the chest panel here, and now you have to attach the chin to this. So just mark up or line up the dots. So the chest panel, the more curved area goes into the head. So this more shallow curve goes to the actual chest panel. So line that up, stitch it, pin and stitch that together, and then we will be joining that to the head. So chest panel with the chin attached to it. Now that joins onto the head. So where you've taken it down to just on his, sort of below his nose there, that will join up with the dot there. And then again, you could do this in 2 halves. Do one side and then come back and do the other if it's easier. So you make sure that it lines up, and you might want to pin that first. And you'll find that when you get to this point, it should be that it would just line up if you've done your 10mm, but it's not that critical even if it doesn't quite line up, this sort of triangle here, because it'll still be patched over, but that's how it should line up. So you do your 10mm all the way around to the dot, and then on the other side as well. That's the front chest panel with the chin in and attached to the head. So just take a note that the top of the chest, you have that lower curve, and then the pointy bit goes onto the head. Well, it wouldn't fit anyway, but just so that you don't start that mistake. And then on the inside, the outside, you should end up with the joins, the seams joining like that. So when you take your 10mm seam allowance to join the body, it will just cut onto that corner of the triangle. And then remember to make sure that you poke his nose through when you actually come to the stuffing. Okay, so then the next bit is to join the front to the back, and to do that we just get it right. Top of the head, join the seams, and then the dot goes just on that seam allowance, or that join there, the seam join, and then all the way down to the base, and then join the other side in the same way. And that's the cat front and back put together now, so that's virtually ready for stuffing. When you come through to turn it inside out, just make sure that you poke the nose out properly. It does give it that extra bit of definition, although in most cases you'll be putting a bit of stuffing around there, but just make sure that it's poked out. So then that should join quite nicely on either side, with the dots there. And that's it, ready for stuffing. If you start doing a few of these, whether it's the hare, the fox or the cat, your friends will probably know, and your friends and family, they'll start giving you bits and pieces, as my cousin has. This is a cushion that she no longer wanted, so I'm going to use the stuffing out of this. perfectly good. I've yet to buy any wadding. I'm very much into using recycled products and being as sustainable as possible, and this is perfectly okay. If I don't know the source, then I'll probably run it through the washing machine, but this is perfectly fine. So when you come to stuffing, I'm not wiring this one, which I have with the hare and the fox. They're slightly bigger, and this one, I think with the construction of the thigh as well, I don't really think it needs it, but that's up to you. If you wanted to add the wiring, you can do, and you could watch the hare or the fox video for that, but for me, I don't think it's necessary. If you wanted to add a bit of extra weight, you could put a little bag of sand or a couple of big stones or pebbles in the base, just to add a bit of weight. Not from the beach, of course, though, because we shouldn't take them from the beach. But start to stuff the face, and before you actually get down towards the neck and the chest, just make sure that the face is really what you want, because you can actually mould it a little bit to give it a little bit more shape. And once you get down to mid-chest, then you've lost that opportunity. Although, as I always say, these needles or pins, or even a very big needle, will work to help move around some of the stuffing. If it's a bit lumpy, or if it's not, if it's a bit hollow anywhere, you can use that to move things around. So that does help. But just make sure you kind of get a nice shape to the head before you go too far. Otherwise it is much more difficult, and then to unstuff it is a bit of a pain. But yeah, carry on. But you can see where that kind of folds over a bit, so make sure you keep stuffing that so that it sort of it comes out properly. I'll come back to you when I've completed the stuffing. The cat's stuffed now, and you can see that his head is quite firm, got a nice firm chest, and I've put the stuffing in the thighs. It's got quite a nice shape to him, and I've taken it down to the guideline for the base, and I've just pinned that up in place with several pins to hold it while I do the stuffing, the patching. But that is just a guideline. You might want a taller cat based on your own cat, or you might want it shorter. It's entirely up to you. And also bear in mind though that when he's standing upright, his shape is going to be slightly like that, and his front legs here and his paws to hold him up. You don't want him sort of standing too upright, so just lean him slightly forward. So now it's just a case of putting the patches on. If you're new to it, then I would say start on a big area before you move up to the face, because where it's more shaped you would need smaller patches. So if you've had a bit of experience on doing the larger areas, that will come easier to you. And just pin them on, and the only thing is, yeah, pin them on and set it aside some distance so you can get a vision of what it's like from a distance, because sometimes if you're up close to something and you put all your patches on, you might think that looks brilliant, but then when you put it away from you, wherever you might want to keep it, perhaps on the hearth or a shelf somewhere, then it gets a different viewing. So just make sure that it looks right at a distance as well as close up. And so I'm going to go and do some patches on this now, and then when I come to do the face, I'll maybe just show you what I'm doing, and then obviously the legs. But the legs I've done just recently out of finished fabric rather than using the base fabric and patching, so I'll show you how to do that shortly. I'll carry on with the patching now. I've almost completed the patching on the body, not quite, but very nearly. So now we're going to go on to the head. With the head, for the nose and mouth, I've just put a piece of fabric onto the nose area, I've done a small chain stitch around the nose and then for his smile. And underneath that, to give it more definition, I've just put pieces of wadding. So there's for his nose area, just a little bit of wadding underneath there, or as much as you like, and pin that in place. Again with the sides, this has just got extra bit of wadding under there and underneath the chin. So what I would do now is to do a tacking stitch all the way around there, so that as you tack, pull it so that it's all nice and smooth and you're taking out any wrinkles, and then that would be ready for the next stage. The side face, in creating the pattern, it's very difficult to make it wide in this area, purely because the bigger it is without any shaping, it just ends up like a big ball. So I've created it like this, so that if you want to just patch as it is, you've got a narrower face, and it's probably more like a kitten, I suppose. But I quite like them with a nice wide face. So all I've done here is get a piece of wadding, and it can be as big as you like. You might want a particularly wide face. Just pop it on the side, and then put your scrap of fabric over top and pin that in place. Obviously you've got to make sure that it's symmetrical. Make sure that you're in the same place and that it's the same sort of size. So once that's stitched in place, like this side, then it's just ready to put your patches on top. I'll get back to you when I've done a bit more of the patching and the head's nearly done. The face virtually done now. I've tacked all the way around the outside with the light colour fabric so you can't be seen, and then patched all my patches round, and some have gone over top of the nose patch. So I've just noticed I've missed one there, so that's got to be done. So coming to the paws, the legs and paws, we've got 2 front legs. I've cut those panels out and just transfer the marking, but be careful, because if this is your final fabric, your outer fabric, you don't want to use a felt tip pen in case it shows through, especially on the darts. The front paws, 2 of those. I've actually done the darts already, but it's quite straightforward. So 2 front paws, 2 back paws, which are a little bit longer because they go underneath the body, and the paw pads. So there's 4 of the paw pads. The first thing to do is to attach the front paws to the leg, and that's quite simply matching up the centre markings and joining on that curve. So do that for the both front legs. So now we're going to fit the upper paw, the paw to the paw pad. So line up the seam of the dart with the dot of the centre mark, and I've trimmed off this dart because it's quite bulky, and then spread that out, and then if you can pin this if you want to. So pin the 2 sort of corners together, this shape area, and then stitch in place. And you'll see there's a little bit of give, because that's to give the extra height. So now you can do this at 10. I've allowed a 10mm seam allowance, but if you want a bigger paw, more chunky paw, then just reduce that down to maybe 8mm, and that will just make it a bit higher. So I've done one here, and then need to turn that through. It's a bit sharp, that is. Make sure that's turned through nicely, and pull those edges out. So that is his back paw. That's got a longer section at the bottom because that actually goes underneath the body, so you secure it onto the body. And then the front leg, so you've already attached this part to the actual leg itself. Then you need to attach that to the paw. So you can see there I would have done right sides together, as you have done with the front paw, right sides together, matching up there, and go all the way around, whether you've decided a 10mm or 8mm seam allowance. Then this one, you need to fold that back on the inside, and then join the two sides together and do a 10mm seam allowance through there, and then we will turn it inside out, or right side out. If you can see that, you've started at this point and gone all the way around to this point. That leaves this flap. When you've turned it through, and the leg as well, then you end up with his paw with your leg attached. So now we have two legs, and we'll have two back paws. And now we have the four paws ready for stuffing. These are the back paws, and they will fit underneath the body. And obviously these are the front paws, which that part will fit onto the body to secure it, but we've put wire in it, and then these will go up onto the side body. If I can show you roughly what that will be like. It'll look something like that. And by putting the wire in there, that helps for the stability. I mean, it stands up as it is now, but it's just an extra stability to put the wire in as well. So this is galvanised wire, 2mm, which I've used for various hares, fox, etc. So hopefully you've got some of that available. You don't need much for this project, I must admit. So cut off an appropriate length, so it's got to come a certain way down here, because this is how you're going to secure it. And just pop that into the paw. And once it's at the end, try and get it to contour the edge of the paw. Just pull it round a bit. And then this is just a bit of a Weetabix packet, but just maybe something thicker you could use, but just to give it a bit more of a base, and then slide that down to the paw. So you've now got the wire into the paw, plus that piece of card. So you start stuffing so that it is above, obviously, the piece of card, because that's just to stop it ending up being too much like a ball. Surprising how much these little feet actually take, these little paws. And then we are ready to attach them to the body. Okay, so you don't want to cut these the back legs, back paws, so you don't want them to be stuffed beyond that point, because that bit's got to fit underneath the body. So here's our body, and just so you can get an idea of where the centre is, so nose, I put that pin there just so it reminds me, and also you've got a seam down there. Pop a pin down there so you can see where that seam is. So that is actually the centre. So then we're going to fit the legs. So which way am I having this right? I'm having the jade one there, and you can see the outline of the piece of card there, which just helps keep it flat. So pin that in place. Oh, by the way, before I do that, let me just show you that I've used a strong cord to join the base together, so it's all sort of kept tight together there, and then this will gradually, when I put the cardboard base on, that will cover that up. So you need to secure that nicely. Then we put our leg in. This takes a little while because you need to do it and then stand it up and see whether you're happy with the positioning of it. But that's how you do it. Pin that in place because you've got your wires going through underneath. And then the other leg, make sure the card's in place properly. And that pin just helps remind you where the centre point is. And the wire's obviously inside or on the base. And then the two back paws, they will just fit like that. Hold on, let me put that back in place. So that's one. And second one. And then you stand it up. And then to smooth off that join, I'm just going to put a patch over top of it so that it's not so obvious. And there's a nice transition to the body. I'll just tap that. It may not be in the right place, but give you an idea. This is something that you need to spend a bit of time on, and again, you know, even check these legs aren't too stiff, too well stuffed, because they might be too prominent. In fact, I can take a little bit out of there. And then I've got a bit of that colour, or maybe bigger, to go over top. Something like that. I'm sure you'll all have your own ideas. So the next step is to secure these with some nice strong thread going around the wire to make sure they're really firmly in place once you're sure that it's the right positioning. So secure them nicely, and also you need to make sure that when it's in place you end up with it this leg looking right, and it's sort of in line. And then I stitched through and underneath, going backwards and forwards so you can't see it, so through the body, in the bit of the leg, through the body, in the leg, all the way to the top, so that that's secure in place, unlike the other two where the legs are free. These are actually stitched to the body. And then obviously do your patching at the top, whichever way you want to blend that in. I must admit it's looking quite colourful, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of different ones that you're going to make. So just to recap then, the nose, the chest That's the middle. I can actually just see the seam underneath there, and you've got the seam line to give you a guidance for where the centre point is, and that helps with you positioning the legs. I mean, you might want them closer together, you might want all four really close. That's up to you. There's our cat with his legs attached now, and this is what it looks like underneath. A bit rough, but the wire is in here and secured with some stitching all the way around it, each wire, and then you can close the gap at the front if, for instance, the seam shows. Just put a few stitches there to hold that in place, and then if you want to make sure that the paws are close, you can just put a few stitches to make them alongside each other, so in the right place. I've actually attached the leg to the body, just going through there, out, and sort of effectively like that, but obviously so you can't see the stitches, so that attaches it quite close to the body. And then I've put a patch over top of each one so that it doesn't look too obvious. I've done a few changes with my patching on the front. I've added a bit of extra colour and done a little bit on his nose. And that's the beauty of this, you can actually just chop and change as and when you feel like it. So that's quite nice to, if you see something that needs changing, you can just put a patch over top. Now I'm going to do the ears next. I'll show you what I've done with these. On the pattern it shows cut two outer and two inner fabric. And obviously this is the finished fabric, so whatever you choose to put on the outside of the ear, whatever fabric it is, cut one out of, or one or two. In fact, I think these are different. All four sides are different. So I've got an inner, that's my two inner ears, and I've just put a couple of patches on them to make them a bit more interesting. And that is my outer ear. So they're all four different fabrics, and then just, and again this is down to your own personal taste. You might want a smaller ear or a bigger ear. Some cats, they're all different breeds, aren't they? So choose whichever one is appropriate for you. So you might want to trim this down. I think I've trimmed off about 10-12 millimeters at the bottom for the size ears that I want for my cat. But I've made it deliberately a bit longer so you can choose to trim it down accordingly. And then just make this little dart here, just trims, it closes a gap at the bottom, makes it narrower at the bottom and gives a little bit more shape to it. And that's on both sides. And then attach them to the ear. Now my last ones I seem to be able to do without doing much as far as folding and trimming the base. So I would try and pin it in place and stitch it on at the back. Obviously it's a bit difficult to do in front of the camera there, but you've got to choose the appropriate place and so that it looks right from the back as well. And the side, I think the side is quite important. So you need a bit of time to get the right positioning of it and make sure you're happy with it. Some cats, when I look at some pictures of them, the cat's ears go straight up from the cheeks, and then others are sort of more plonked on top. So it depends what style you want, and you're going to have to just play around with it until you're happy. And to do it in front of the camera it's not so easy for me. And then just stitch along here. I've got a thread I've left loose to do that. Stitch along here both sides, And if you want to make them stand up a bit more, you can just stitch in there to make them a little bit more upright. I'll sort those out for you and show you in the next video. The ears are attached now. All I've done is stitch around the lower edge, but it does take time to make sure they're in the right position and equally spaced, etc. So that takes a little bit of time. Once they are, just pin them in place and then stitch around the back. And now I've done the eyes as well, and this cat I'm going to use buttons and then eye glued to it. So I always put the eye in first and take it through to the back, just a little bit of scrap of fabric there to hold it in place, and then that will be covered up with a bit of wadding and the same fabric as this green here, just to disguise it, and likewise on the other side. But that just pulls the eye nice and close, and it makes it a little bit sort of puckered and drawn in. With regard to the eyes, for this one I've got a whole selection here. I wouldn't recommend them actually. I mean, they're lovely bright colours, but they're a little bit on the small side. That's why I've put the button on this one. And also, when you try and take the back off, well, it's impossible. You know, when you actually take the back off, you also take the colour off as well. So what I'm going to do is to choose ones. I think I've chosen this pair, and then just glue gun those on in place, and hopefully that would work. Or you could just leave the buttons there if you prefer. There's another eye that I've also got, this type. The colour's wrong for it though. I like the size of that, and I think it's quite a dominant eye. That's a good one. That comes with a stalk, and I think they're about £3 a pair on eBay. And this one I bought some while ago, I think actually for the fox, but I like the size of that, and the fact that it's got the shank on the back to draw it in like a button. But I'm not so keen on the silver, I'd rather that be black. But also I've lost the other one and I don't know where I got it from, so I've got to do some research on that one. But you could say just leave buttons, but the reflection on a bit of a glass or plastic eye I think makes quite a bit of difference. So I think that's it. And the whiskers, I've put the whiskers on, which is just straightforward. This is actually a fishing line. My husband fishes anyway, so I've got plenty of that available. And just thread it through your needle, go from left to right, pull it through. When you pull it through, there will be a kink, so you have to make it that bit longer so you can cut off the kink, and then just dob a bit of super glue to keep it in place. Oh, and I've done these little knobbly bits just to indicate paws, give it a bit more character. I actually chose a slightly brighter one in the end, so that's his eyes put on. I'm going to call this one Monet because it reminds me of the Monet colours at the Giverny, his garden. And also there's actually a drink called Monet, it's a cocktail. So the next thing to do will be his collar, choose the right colour to make a collar for him, and I can get a name tag, and the tail. So I've stitched the tail now, but I've left this gap, as I said, to put the stuffing in, and I've not gone right to the end because that's going to be underneath. This top end I've left it wide here, although it will actually in the end be tapered. The reason I've left it wide again is to help you with the stuffing of it, and you can adjust that later. So turn this inside out, put my wire in, whichever wire you choose to use, and then begin to stuff and patch. And then the next thing would be to sort of finish the end off here so that it's nice and neat and a bit pointy, and then fit it to the base of the cat. So that's the tail done. I've put a few extra patches on it and secured it to the base so the wires actually protrude right into the centre of the base. Is one of them there that you can see, and there, and then stitch that in place so it's really nice and secure. And I've also gone up a couple of inches just securing it behind the tail as well. You can probably see my stitches just in there, and then that's ready for the base to go on and stitched in place like that. Stitch all the way around, and then if you can see that, but you've got a little bit of movement available on there. I'm going to keep the tail sticking up. If you've had a curling tail around the bottom and sticking up, once you've bent it and then put your patches on, it's likely to stay in that place, because when you bend it round you're going to get some crinkles here, and then if you patch over top of the crinkles that will hold it in place a bit better. So I'm not going to move that back again because I quite like the tail up, and I'm going to leave it like that for the moment. But as I say, if you want a tail coming round the side and curling up, it's best to put your patches on once you've bent it in place, and that way it'll more likely to stay there.